First off, thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Jan Enns and I'll be your moderator as we hear from our awesome speakers on how you can advance your asset management practices with our free training program. This program consists of 3 options. One is presentations to boost awareness and support with your council or board. The other is technical assistance with your working with your levels of service. And the third is operationalizing. Okay, and we always get bonus points when we say that, right? Operationalizing asset management in the softer people side of this. And that is in the areas of organizational structure, capacity, and culture. I'll introduce our rockstar panelists in just a moment, but first, just a few bits on the housekeeping items. So first off, this webinar is being recorded and we will send you out an email with a link to this, and we'll probably also include the program guide and the expression of interest in that email as well. So you have it, so you can get registered for the program. We will be, our speakers will be taking questions after the session. You'll be able to ask questions just by typing them into the chat, and I'll moderate those questions back to our speakers today. So without further ado, I'm going to get into some introductions of our rockstar panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Mr. Asset Management BC himself, Wally Wells. Wally is the very knowledgeable, passionate, and dedicated Executive Director of the Association, and he's going to say a few words about Asset Management BC. Next speaking will be David Albright, our operationalization specialist, and not just because he can say it. David is the principal at Asset Insights Net. He specializes in strategic planning, multi-criteria decision analysis, process mapping, and the design and delivery of asset management training. Christina Benty is former mayor of the town of Golden and the owner of Strategic Leadership Solutions. Christina is a speaker, a well-known speaker, facilitator, and published author who can turn any conversation into asset management. We're delighted to have her as one of our keynote presenters. Colwyn Sunderland is there's Colwyn, an infrastructure planning engineer with Kerwood Lydell Associates, an integration specialist. Colwyn excels at supporting local governments in multidisciplinary decision-making and the development of systems, policies, and programs, making him the perfect choice for our levels of service program option. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Wally to tell us more about Asset Management BC and our program.
Well, good morning, all. It's nice to see so many familiar names. I do know many of you out there. Asset Management BC is our BC-based community of practice. Our role is to serve you in our local governments and our First Nations. That's why we're so pleased to have this program. And basically what we do is one thing, and that's share information with you and provide knowledge transfer. And that's exactly what this is. It's hopefully for sharing information on a two-way street and for knowledge transfer. We can do this and offer this for you at no cost because of the funding that came from the Government of Canada through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Municipal Asset Management Program. And we're delighted to be able to do this. The past couple of months have been developing the details of the program with the material you have out there now. We just issued our 30th edition of the newsletter with some great information in it for you. Our website is posted up on the screen for you at the moment. Many of the resources are there. So I suggest you go back there, including the documents associated with the presentations you're about to hear. So speaking of the presentations you're about to hear, I'm going to turn it over to David Albright to talk about how to progress your asset management, operationalize asset management. David.
Thank you, Wally. Good morning, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today to share information with you on operationalizing asset management as one of our 3 training programs. We have designed this program to help local governments on their journey to sustainable service delivery. And this program is being conducted in a peer learning environment where a cohort of approximately 7 local governments of varying types and sizes and locations across the province will come together and focus on two key things as a group. Firstly, the cohort members will work together to uncover and analyze the barriers that have been affecting their respective efforts at getting asset management off the ground. You know, these barriers come in many flavors and types. There are political, social, cultural, logistical, and other kinds of barriers. And these barriers also affect roles all the way from the CAO to frontline staff. The second thing that the cohort is going to focus on together as a group is to explore the application of a framework to dismantle these barriers. The framework is being referred to as the 4 Cs, which includes collaboration, culture, capacity, and counsel. The architects of the 4 Cs, David Allen and David Love from the City of Courtenay, have articles that are available on the Asset Management BC website. Most recently, the article from David Allen is available in the most recent issue of the newsletter, and I urge you if you're looking for a deeper dive into the 4 Cs, that's where you will find it. Now, in terms of the outcomes of the program, this operationalizing program, there are really 2 key outcomes. For the participants themselves in the program, they will leave with a mini business case that they can take back to their respective organizations to help them operationalize asset management using the 4 Cs principles. The second outcome is for the BC community of practice at large. And the outcome here will be a suite of business cases which will share the stories from a series of local governments and indicating how operationalizing was effectively embedded within different organizations across the province. And there will also be a potential primer that summarizes the principles identified by the cohort in this training program. So let me move on to the question why. Why do we want to operationalize asset management within our organization? There are many good reasons. Most fundamentally, we want to get ourselves on that path to sustainable service delivery. But I believe that a lot of these benefits can be summarized into 2 key categories: efficiency and effectiveness. As local governments, we want to be efficient in the way we execute on our asset management plans. And we want to be effective in the way we realize value from our assets in alignment with our strategic objectives. So efficiency and effectiveness are some of the outcomes to be realized through this program. And with that, I'd like to conclude by recognizing that communication, some of you may have thought, well, why is communication not one of those 4 Cs? Well, communication actually underpins all of the 4 Cs. It is right at the heart of the program as well. Now, with that in mind, I think this is a good point for me to hand over to Christina Benty, who's going to tell us about the building awareness with your councils and your boards. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. I love those 4 Cs, and I'm going to add another C. I'm going to talk about champions. So one of the things that we would love to see is more champions around the governance table, right? Asset management needs passionate champions. And before COVID hit, I spent a lot of time traveling around the country talking about asset management. And oftentimes I would ask staff, okay, so what keeps you up at night? And almost invariably, I heard over and over and over again, asset sustainability and service viability. And so one of the questions that I would ask is how much time does that dominate the agenda? And what I would find out from staff is very little. It doesn't dominate council or board's agenda very often. So I think that what I'm excited about with this program is that it's an opportunity to get asset management on the agenda and to keep it on the agenda. And there's we have two champions. One of them is myself, and the other, there's a number of champions here, but two champions that are available to speak to your council, myself and Diane Kalin-Sucre. Diane is a retired CAO, and I'm a retired politician, so we understand how to speak politician to your council and your board. And so we're going to be, this program allows us to speak to your council, speak to your board about what is their role in asset management. And they have a huge role. So our job is going to be to demystify and in some cases decontaminate asset management. Partly because some people hear the word asset management and they're like, oh, they start to fall asleep, right? And as champions, part of our job is to really raise the awareness about why this matters, why it needs to be on the agenda. What is the role of council, and how do you engage with your staff? And in some ways, the cool opportunity here is the fact that Diane and myself can, we're able to speak to it in such a way that that we want to impassion elected officials so that they can also be champions with the public why this matters. One of the things that I often say when I'm doing work with elected officials is that your role as an elected official is to represent the public on what are the services your community wants and needs now and into the future, and at what level. And then the other component of that, and here's the kicker, right? What are we willing as a community, what are we willing and able to pay for? And the key here is you can't ask people what are they willing and able to pay for if you haven't clearly, as an organization, defined what are the services we provide, what level of service do we provide it at, and what does it cost to provide. And so I'm going to turn it over to Colwyn now to talk a little bit about level of service.
Well, thank you, Christina. And I think you've now really expanded David's challenge by adding a fifth C. He's going to have to work that into operationalization. I said it correctly, Jan. And you know, I don't think that we could possibly meet a bigger champion of asset management than yourself, Christina. So thank you. While Jan's working on getting my slide up here, one of the things that I want to acknowledge, and I think, Christina, you already sort of said half of what I wanted to say about levels of service, which is, you know, that you can't manage what you don't measure. So, you know, really we need, when we're talking about delivering services using our assets, and that's really what asset management is about, is delivering services. How can we talk about the services if the only thing that we're focusing on is the cost? And so really what, you know, as I was thinking about the title of the level of service workshop series, I'm tempted to describe it as demystifying, because one of the things that we see when we're talking about levels of service is it's complicated, it's a little bit muddy, it's not, you know, from the practical aspect of asset management. You know, my background is in engineering. I've worked in operations and engineering departments in local government and also in consulting. And we tend to want to think about things in very concrete and very specific terms. But that's not how members of our communities experience the services that local governments provide. So we need to talk about levels of service at a number of different levels. Okay, Jan, you want to move along?
Sure.
So while we're advancing the slide, there we are. One of the things that, one of the ways that I like to look at or think about levels of service is in terms of decisions that we make in our own lives. And if you're going to go out and buy a car, what would you think about in terms of the criteria for making that decision for buying a car? Can you imagine what your car might look like if the only thing that you were focusing on was the purchase price or what it's going to cost you to operate your car in the first year? You might be in the market for a really nasty looking old beater. But the reality is we have to think about a whole bunch of other criteria when we're buying a car. We have to think about safety. We have to think about reliability. We have to think about efficiency. We have to think about capacity. How many passengers do you need to carry in your car? And so we make different decisions about buying a car. We don't all run out to buy the cheapest car we can buy in terms of a purchase price. We don't run out to buy the smallest car that we can buy because we need that car to do things for us other than just get yourself, down the shortest road possible. So we need to think about local government services the same way that we think about these kinds of decisions in our own lives. And in doing that, we need to look past next year's budget, and we need to think about what is it that the assets that we own and manage need to do for us. And levels of service is really about looking at it from all of those different angles. Can you go to the next slide, Jen? Thanks. So levels of service, we can think about it kind of like an iceberg. And at the top of the iceberg is what services do we deliver? In every local government, you can probably list at least half a dozen services, no matter how big you are or how small you are. First Nations, same general principle. For example, if one of your services is providing a water utility, you're providing drinking water to your customers. The next layer down on the iceberg is what are the things that we have to do in order to deliver that service? So generally speaking, in delivering any service, there are some levels of service that you're really required or mandated to provide. And we can't look past those. We know that we need to do it. So in the case of water services in BC, the province legislates that we have to provide water that's safe to drink. And there's a whole bunch of different criteria that go under that, which we'll get to in a moment. There are also a whole bunch of things when you consider a service like a water utility that are really up to your community to decide. But often we just assume that these levels of service are being provided. And so for anybody who's been through the discussion on a water service about whether or not you have hydrants that serve the definition or the requirements for your property insurance, you're probably discovering that there's a whole bunch underneath that, that simple aspect of your service, which we might call a community level of service. In other words, how does the public perceive the service? How does the public value the service? And then underneath that, we've got a whole bunch of different technical parameters that we need to keep track of in order to know that we can provide each of these community levels of service. So we want to move along. Thanks, Jan. How do we do this? It's complicated. There's a lot of different things that we need to think about when we're delivering services. First of all, we need to align our service delivery with what goals and objectives have already been defined for your community. So we think about what commitments has council made, what's in your OCP, what's in your corporate strategic plan, and you've probably got some commitments that you've made there to your community around some of the main services that your community describes. One layer down from that, we need to consider what the assets are that we need in order to deliver those services. So that kind of turns asset management on its head because we usually start by doing an inventory of assets. In this case, what we're really doing is we're developing an inventory of our services and then looking at, in fundamental terms, what assets do we need in order to deliver each of these services. And as we get into another layer of detail down, there's all of these different aspects of delivering a service like capacity and efficiency, reliability, safety that we need to consider in order to define what it is that we're providing to the community. And then how do we measure that? How do we measure it from the perspective of the community's perception of the service? So we might be thinking about things like complaints or surveys. And also, how do we measure it technically in order to know that we can reliably and consistently provide it over time? And then we're looking at things like, how do we measure pressure or flow in a water system? How do we know that we're delivering service reliably to the entire community? What do we need to keep track of? So we have a simple Excel spreadsheet template that we're using in our workshop series to essentially learn by doing the business of defining and assessing and identifying gaps in your capacity to deliver service, both now and in the future. And once we've defined those gaps, we can start practicing a little bit around strategies that you might build into an asset management plan or into your ongoing asset management program if you're operationalizing asset management, in order to ensure that you keep track of levels of service, you know where you have gaps, and you're making the decisions you need to in order to prioritize that precious funding in order to deliver the services that you need to deliver. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to you, Jan. Thanks, and I'm hopeful that that many of you here are interested in taking these workshops.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Colin. You can see, folks, why I say that we have a rock star group of panelists and program leaders for this. And they can all say, operationalizing. Good on you. Excellent. So let me tell you how you can get more information. I know you're super eager to join this program. There are limited seats available. We're open till October 9th. So please go to the website, assetmanagementbc.ca. There's a link there. You can click for the details. You can download the program guide and the expression of interest form. Super easy to read through and get that in. It'll go straight to Wally Wells. We're compiling the information, and then we'll be looking at how we can reach out and go through the process to fill these cohorts. The last thing I just want to say as we wrap up is that I'm going to open the floor for questions. Again, just simply type them into your chat. I'm just going to type a little message to you folks there now. Type them into the chat room, and our panelists are here to answer your questions as well. We can stay on if there are extra questions too. We also just want to remind you, go to our website. And the other thing is to follow us on social. We're both on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And so please join the conversation there. Thanks for joining us today.